Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have an important task ahead of you. Soon you'll be sequestered to decide the fate of General Othello, a decorated officer in the Venetian army and a man plagued by mental illness. You've heard the arguments of the prosecution, who assert that Othello not only viciously murdered his wife in cold blood, but that he did so after extensive thought and planning. But we have a problem here. The prosecution has failed to address the plea of the defendant. The defendant is pleading guilty but mentally ill. He is not pleading just guilty, nor is he using an insanity defense. Allow me to define the guilty but mentally ill plea to clarify your exact responsibilities as ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Guilty but mentally ill is a plea with greater responsibility allotted to the defendant due to the acknowledgement of guilt. However, there are extenuating circumstances due to the existence of a mental illness. Thus, a lesser burden of proof rests with the defense with regard to demonstrating the actual mental illness. In this case, we cannot debate that a murder occurred. The point of contention, then, is the degree of murder. This means that the burden of proof rests with the prosecution to prove that there was forethought involved in this crime and that the defendant is not suffering from a mental illness. When utilized, the guilty but mentally ill plea provides for necessary treatment of mentally ill defendants, while still ensuring that those defendants are punished for their crimes. By finding Othello guilty but mentally ill, you will ensure that he receives the psychological help he so desperately needs. This plea was entered on behalf of the defendant for very clear reasons. Othello is in fact mentally ill. We cannot deny that the death of Desdemona was a result of the actions of Othello, but those very actions prove that Othello is a man suffering from a mental illness. Had he not suffered from this mental condition, we would not be here deciding his fate today. You've heard the testimony yourself. Othello was convinced that his actions would purify his wife, whom a dear friend had led him to believe was unfaithful to him. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the idea that any action would result in the purity of someone's soul is ridiculous to rational people like you and me. But Othello's mental illness had rendered him incapable of making rational choices. The disconnect in action versus intent is clear and has a direct connection to the punishment you will be deciding to confer upon Othello. The concept of mens rea is crucial in Othello's case. Law states that mens rea, which is Latin for guilty mind, is a necessary element of many crimes, including first-degree murder, the charge that brings us here today. Homicide is a results crime, in that it forbids any intentional or knowing conduct that results in the death of another human being. Intentional in this sense means that the actor possessed a purpose or desire that his or her objective, in this case the death of Desdemona, be achieved. Knowing means that the actor was aware or practically certain that death would result from those actions. Simply put, Othello lacked the mens rea that makes him fully culpable for this crime. He did not intend to murder Desdemona, nor did he plan the events of the evening in question to lead to her murder. He did not enter her bedchamber with the intention of murdering his wife. He wanted to purify her soul, to eliminate the evil he believed existed inside of her. The death of Desdemona was unintentional because Othello, clearly suffering from a mental illness, simply did not make the connection that his attempts to enter life, or that his attempts to return her to a state of innocence could potentially end her life. If mens rea requires that the defendant's behavior be intentional and knowing, then the question of forethought is no question at all. Othello did not have any intention of ending her life, nor was he aware of the factors that her death would result from his actions. The prosecution asserts that Othello may have been mentally disturbed at worst. Emotionally disturbed, excuse me. Othello was emotionally disturbed, certainly, but this emotional disturbance is a manifestation of a greater mental disorder. The defense has proven that Othello had a pre-existing mental illness, stemming largely from his position in society. We've proven that Venice is not perfect, as pictures may suggest, but one that is plagued by racial discrimination and the ostracization of those considered to be the other. Othello, with dark skin and thick lips, is clearly the other in Venice. Brabantio stated in testimony that he wanted his daughter to marry a soldier. This was his only stipulation for being a police father-in-law. And he received into his family through marriage one of the most decorated generals in Venetian army, the army. His dark skin, however, eliminated all such accolades in Brabantio's mind, despite the close friendship the two men had shared. Why wasn't a military general good enough for Brabantio's only daughter? Because of his background and skin color, nothing more. This bigoted behavior is not unique to Brabantio, however. Many other Venetian citizens are guilty of racial discrimination towards a man who had fought in battle to defend them. Truly, this crime is one of a community. Considering these facts, don't you consider Othello's tendency to mistrust others to be justified? The defense has also proven that the mental illness from which Othello suffered manifested itself during his time in Cyprus, when he was under extreme stress following his falling out with Lieutenant Cassio. Plagued by headaches and seizures, this illness affected him physically as well as mentally. You've heard testimony from his wife Desdemona, the Medicean who knew him best and who saw beyond the color of his skin. She fell in love with him because of his gentle nature, which may seem at odds with his military background. She knew him to be calm and rational, a man who would never become angry without cause. So imagine her reaction when the man she knew became a virtual stranger. His mental illness manifested itself in such a way that Othello's personality became so different that she would do anything to return things to the way they had been. In fact, she blames herself for her own death and even asserted in testimony that the person who was in the bedroom with her that night was not her husband. That person is someone she had never met before, someone whose mental health had deteriorated rapidly. Just last week, Desdemona testified, and I quote, "I believe I was killed by jealousy and some blind madness." The events Iago had set in motion ensured that things could never return to the way they were. Othello's mind had been poisoned by his comrade, confidant, and dear friend Iago, who had seen firsthand the mental decline of his general. Iago may not be on trial today, but his culpability in this crime cannot be denied. His proof of Desdemona's infidelity is laughable at best, and yet he continued to manipulate for his own gains a man whose tenuous hold on reality grew fainter and fainter. The defense has uncovered evidence that Iago admitted to hating Othello, and that he went so far as to plan a wedding gift from Othello to Desdemona in Cassio's room as a way to prove to Othello Desdemona's infidelity. With no one else to trust, Othello became a man who could no longer make rational decisions. With his confidence placed in Iago's words, the manifestations of Othello's illness grew increasingly intense as well as more frequent. 1, 2, 3. 3 simple steps leading up to a tragic conclusion: justification, manifestation, exploitation. Thank you for your service today. We of the defense implore you to consider carefully. Othello is a man guilty of a terrible crime, yes, but his society and his own friends are guilty for destroying him mentally. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, defend Othello as he once defended you.